silent mode. All right. Well, this is Virginia and I.
You made an interesting comment last night. I can check him on this. I think you said you have gone in how many years?
42 years.
How many times?
21 times.
To the same place.
Yeah. Well, not exactly the same place. 18 of them were to the same place, more or less. Well, that's getting into the introduction. So anyway, 42 years, starting in 1973 and ending in our 50th anniversary year in 2015, which is what this this was 2 days before our 50th anniversary in the west coast of Newfoundland, Gros Morne National Park. But we've been there 21 times, 42 years. The first 2 years were in Labrador, the first 2 times. The rest of the times have all been in the island of Newfoundland. And 18 of those were on our own sailboat. So our children, you'll see them, essentially were born and grew up involved in going to the south coast of Newfoundland. So, but I'm going to start out talking about the geology, and there will be geology throughout the whole talk, although most of it's going to be right at the front end. But it's interesting geology, and because particularly those who went to Scotland will appreciate some of this. But the whole thing begins with the Canadian Shield, which is the largest area of exposed Archean rock in the world, somewhere between 2.5 and 4 billion years old, and that's the blue area. You know, this pointer isn't going to work, so it's that blue area up here. And it's interestingly enough, it actually extends underneath the United States, and so while it's not on the surface like it is in Canada, it's down there, and it extends quite a bit further south. This is the line, A to A1 line here. And so it's largely metamorphic rocks such as gneiss and granite, and intrusive. It's now pretty level, but it used to be 39,000 feet. And it's a continent-sized block of distinct geology. In the basement and much in north, and also Grand.
In the Grand Canyon, is that the Vishnu schist or down in that area?
I don't remember. I don't know, but it is certainly part of the basement rock. It's
In my county, determined 39,000 feet at one time. How's that determined?
I don't know how the geology. John could probably answer that question. I don't know. They somehow knew that there were mountains there, and they eroded.
Right. Well, it's basically what you have to think about. The Shield is an ancient continent, one of the very first continents moving around, and they look at the amount of material that's been eroded off, and it's a mass balance kind of equation. You say, okay, we got this much debris that got eroded off, and pile it up on top of it. It's got to have been this high. It's rough.
Yeah, similar calculations have been done in other parts of the, like in Scotland, though those mountains were apparently as high as 17,000 feet at one point, and sandstone and it's all eroded. But that was sandstone. This is more tougher stuff. Okay, so moving along, so focusing on eastern Canada and the United States, between 1.5 and 1 billion years, there was something called the Grenfell orogeny, which is basically South America and North America joining to essentially form the supercontinent Rodinia. And as it's, if you read a little about supercontinents, they're inherently unstable because the heat eventually from the Earth's core causes them to move apart. And so you'll see, and you probably all know most of this, is Rodinia is followed, by other supercontinents, and they form and then they break up. So the Iapetus Ocean, which so the breakup of the Rodinia resulted in an ocean that's something not that different from the Atlantic. Actually, it's bigger. So that occurred in about 700 to 570 million years ago, and then that didn't stay open very long, really, in the big picture of things. So about 440 million years, the Pangaea continent began to form, and in the process of doing that, some very interesting things happened. This is showing. You'll see these colors occur. in the talk. But these are parts of the rock that ended up starting in Africa, in Gondwana, and ended up there. We also know that part of Canada, northern Canada, ended up in Scotland. And so there was a mess. The continents came together, but when they finally came apart, when the Atlantic formed, things that were once on one got stuck to the other, including Scotland and the eastern, you'll see, the eastern part of Newfoundland. This kind of shows the real big picture of the whole eastern part of the world, so to speak, where the Atlantic and the Ichthys Ocean were. And this orangish stuff in here is the Appalachian origin, but there are similar origins at roughly the same time occurred all the way up into Greenland, and then across Scandinavia, Scotland, England, all the way down through Africa. So there's similar rock on both sides of the ocean that occurred pretty much at the same time. And the docking that occurred, that formed the Pangaea, occurred in several stages. It was originally called, the Taconic orogeny. There were other phases that occurred in the Devonian, and also the last one was called the Alleghenian, or sometimes referred to as the Appalachian orogeny, that formed the mountains. The current mountains that are in the Appalachian, which extend all the way from the northern tip of the island of Newfoundland all the way down through the United States, and even beyond that, are the eroded results of that collision. In fact, it shows the extension of this orogeny all over 10,000 kilometers. So it's quite interesting. So a lot of what we think of in this part, well, not in this part of the world, but in the eastern part of the United States and the western part of Europe had a common origin. So this just shows some of the timing of this. Around 400 to 350 million years ago, you have this docking, the first phase of the docking, the Akkadian. Then at 350, there was the Allegheny orogeny, and eventually, when the ocean started to part, you have the Atlantic portion less than, well, the actual Atlantic, I think, started opening around 70 million years ago. But you ended up with Newfoundland, the island, as in these different colors, because I'll show you shortly. There's the origin of these parts of the island, not just Newfoundland, but also eastern Canada and the United States came from different places. So right here, it shows the extension of what we were just talking about. This blue, the green area right here is the same rock that goes all the way up here, extending not quite as far. Well, in fact, yes, extending up here as well as on the western end of Newfoundland. The blue-gray area here is the same rock here, and also here, and way up here. And that's that blue-gray area is essentially parts. The first part, the Blue Ridge, is essentially junk that was in underneath the ocean, and sandstone shale. This rock is sediments and lava, less than 1 billion years old. It originated from Europe and Africa, but remained after Pangaea. And then the yellow region, which is up here, called Gander, and also there's a piece of it up here in Newfoundland, and that extends down into the United States. That is mostly intrusive as granite, 400 million year old granite, and that's in fact what the eastern, like the White Mountains and the Green Mountains of the United States are from. So that's that same rock that extends way up into Canada and then New Brunswick, and also then into Newfoundland. The coastal plain of the United States is much younger, and it's less than 100 million years. Okay, and this is just another big picture showing the assembly of these various pieces. 1 through 3 essentially are the assembly of the Canadian Shield, and then number 4, which is what we were just talking about, the Appalachian Mountains. And number 5 is the western part, which where we are here, but we're not talking about that today.
And the speculation is the Appalachians were at the prime when everything that collided in there were on par with the Rockies. They were serious mountains.
Yeah. Okay, so now we are going to take a big jump in distance. That's kind of the big picture. Now we're going to turn to Labrador, which is the very northern part. Well, I should mention something else about the United States, because we're
Go back
from...
and point to where Labrador is.
Yeah, let me go back. Let's see, let me go back. Labrador is this section up here, and then you have Greenland. But this is Labrador. This is, as far as the modern Canadian provinces go, it's called the province of Newfoundland, but it includes Labrador and the island of Newfoundland.
You're not pointing to the right thing, Mike, because if you look at Newfoundland, Labrador's right across from it, and you're pointing to the...
This whole thing is Labrador.
But so is that part of the coast.
Yeah, this is all Labrador right here. I'm not showing the actual physical. I'm just showing you the general region. This is Labrador.
Okay.
Trust me, I'm right.
Not time to that.
There's a big clue here. It says Torngat. Torngat is the name of the mountains in northern Labrador. And this is Newfoundland. But you'll see the rock is very different. And the other interesting thing about, which I was about to say before I was so rudely interrupted, was...
Can't give up, can you?
What I was about to say...
After that nice thing I said to you about your talks not being easy.
You're taking all that back. Yeah, upstate New York, the Adirondacks, where our other home is, were once thought to be part of the Appalachians, but they are not. They're part of the Laurentian rock, so it's totally different rock system. It's part, really, the Canadian Shield. The easternmost part of the Canadian Shield extends down into, it's on the surface in the Adirondacks. Okay, so Labrador. So here's the peninsula. This is the Ungava Bay side. This is the Atlantic Ocean over here, and this is the geology of Labrador. All totally different from what's in the United States and on the East Coast and Newfoundland itself. The pink areas here are very old gneiss, some of the oldest gneiss in the world. 4 billion years old. There's younger gneiss. There's also various stratification, various other forms of metamorphic rock, and then there's also intrusive volcanic rock. And this, well, I'm going to get you into this. We ended up in this region in 1973. So this is another map showing a less detailed picture of the geology, and this all pretty much is nice in this area here. So in 1973, we flew by airplane from Boston up to Nain. Actually, in 1973, I had already graduated, so I was working in upstate New York. But Nain is the northernmost Eskimo village on the coast of Labrador. So we flew there by float plane, and there's no airstrip. And we launched 3 kayaks. There were 6 of us, and we kayaked all the way up to this area up here, Nakvak Fjord. In fact, Nakvak is the name of my sailboat. So this trip was planned by my friend Chris Gerza, and we made a second trip back there 2 years later in 1975. And Virginia was not on the kayak trip; she was on the sailing trip, and we did some interesting things. So this was on our friend's sailboat, Steve and Lissy Luttrell. They sailed it all the way up from Boston, and we just jumped on board in Maine.
So about what's the distance there that you kayak?
Yeah, well, I'm going to get into that. So this is actually showing the route. The kayaking was about 250 miles up into here. So this took us about 9 days to get all the way up. What we did was we went into this fjord here called the Saglak Fjord. Our original plan was to take the hike, get on a river and head over to the west coast, simply cross the peninsula. But when we got there, there just wasn't enough water in that river to do that. It has since been done. Probably in the 90s. Someone actually did the same trip that Chris Gertz, our friend, dreamed up. But what we ended up doing was disassembling the kayaks and trying to save them, and particularly trying to save them from polar bears ripping them apart, because we had no other way to get back. This was pretty remote stuff. There's no satellite material. Yeah, okay, you're worried I'm going to trip over it.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you see me dancing. Yeah, so there's no, at that time, there was no way to, we were way north of this town, and we depended on those kayaks. So anyway, fortunately nothing ever did happen to them. But this is some of the oldest rock in the world, and it's part of the Canadian Shield. And I mentioned the second visit was with Virginia, was on the sailboat. Okay, so yeah, here we were. So here we are, and what we ended up doing is disassembling the kayaks, packing them up, and we started hiking and attempting to essentially do climbing in the what's called the Torngat Mountains of northern Labrador. And all of us, we had food that we had pre-assembled in waterproof bags, and we sealed them. And so we had all of the stuff in our kayaks. The food was okay for the kayaking, but it really wasn't great for the hiking. And Chris, the leader, had no trouble, and the rest of us just wolfed all the food down every day as fast as we debated whether sucking a Tootsie Roll for an hour was better than just chomping it down, and things like that, because there was no recourse. We did do some fishing, but other than that, anyway, but Chris, amazingly, his metabolism, he was probably the strongest guy in the trip, and he was the one to actually accumulate food and candy and victual. So at night when we were in our tents, he would break out this bar of chocolate with the rest of it. After we had, by the way, licked the wrappers, the butter wrappers. Licking the butter wrappers that were used in dinner was actually a treat, and it was located. But he was very generous with this. And the other thing about Chris, he kept up the bottom of the raisin market, because I hated raisins, and even when I was really hungry, all I could do to avoid, not getting them down. Let's put it that way. But he was willing to trade chocolate for raisins. So anyway, so we ended up breaking up into two groups. Chris, myself, and another person. We looked at our maps, and there was a peak up there that we thought was pretty high, and we decided we would try to climb this peak, over 5,000 feet. The other group, feeling even less strong than we are, decided to try to do it again, but from a different route, and we'll talk about that. So this is one of my pictures from 1973, looking out to sea from the Saglek Fjord. And so all of this is very old and nice. And here's pictures that aren't mine, but I got them from the web. This is Saglek Fjord, showing some of the stratification as well as the folding that went on during this Torngat origin. The small ponds are glacially created out of the gneiss.
You can see them across the fjord right there. You can see the folding.
Yeah, you can see that. That's what it is.
That's
That picture right here. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, it says that was down a pretty fur piece, 68, 100 miles when that was going on.
What's that?
So this is a couple of our pictures. Here's Steve and Elizabeth Luttrell in their kayak. I'm obviously taking these pictures. So, and there's two kayaks in front of me. But these cliffs here are 3,000 feet high, and we went through long stretches, maybe almost day-long stretches, where we could not get ashore if we wanted to get out of the weather. So fortunately, the weather was cooperative, but that was always something in our mind about trying to get how far was it to another place where we could actually get out of the water. This rock is 4 billion-year-old gneiss. All this-
What time of year, Mike?
This was all in the summer. It was in July,
Okay.
kind of the warmest time of the year. This water is not warm, by the way. There are icebergs in this water. So this is just a picture of some of the gneiss. This is a picture of us camping on the tundra north of Maine, the tent here. These, one of the amazing things about this area was the amount of mosquitoes, not black flies, but mosquitoes, and there were hordes of them. So we ended up using head nets and picking up your head net to shovel the food down and then closing the head net. In the morning when we lifted the fly off, a huge mass of blackness rose up, and we were wondering whether they would actually lift the fly itself. We did some fishing, and we did some kayaking among icebergs. And all these kayaks are Klepper kayaks. Those are still available. You can still buy these. They're fold boats. They totally disassemble. And we had spray covers on the top of them. This is another, we're heading north. These are a couple of mountains called Bishop, Mitre, and Braid Mountain, over 4,000 feet, 4265 along the coast. This is a Moravian town that was established in 1771, and it was abandoned in when we got there in 73. It had been abandoned for almost 20 years. And there's a picture of everybody but me, because I'm taking this picture, in one of the dwellings there.
Now, you say Moravian, is that where they were from?
Yeah, they're German.
Wow. Missionaries.
Why did they abandon?
Mosquitoes.
Well, they stayed there for hundreds of years. So, but I think in general, this area was, as people started, they actually ended up migrating south to get into a more civilized area, and because the east coast of Newfoundland, Newfoundland was largely a fishing community, and that just gradually began to.
Question is where they get the wood to build their structures.
Not from here, and that's another problem because there is no trees anywhere near here. So here's one of the elements of the adventure. How am I doing here? Here's one of the elements of the adventure. We were attempting to climb this mountain here, and it's now has a name. It didn't then, but we were pretty sure. Our maps at the time had 500-foot contour intervals. You can hide a lot of problems in a contour map of that detail. But we thought there looked like there might be a route, and the route we swung around here and went up this ridge to do this peak. And this is a Google Earth image showing our route in red to this peak. Narrow ridges here with glaciers and what have you on each side. This is an actual top map. This actually has 100-foot top intervals, but we got this map later. We didn't have this available to us at that point, but this just shows our route. The red route is us going up from the east. The other folks were trying to come in from the south, which was shorter walking, but in fact, it ended up on a ridge that was much too difficult. And that route hasn't been climbed, wasn't climbed until the 90s, 97, and the second attempt at it, 2 people died.
Virginia, did you approve this trip?
Yes, I was in Greece in different kinds of hills.
So this is the summit. This is the summit of Mount d'Iberville, and Mount Caubec. There's an interesting story that goes with those names too. Quebec is right on the border of Quebec and Newfoundland, and so the Quebecers named it after a French explorer, Mount d'Iberville. But as it turned out, the Newfoundlanders, as the mapping got better, they realized the highest point was wholly within Newfoundland, none of it. And so Mount d'Iberville is actually 30 feet away, down lower. So the actual summit is wholly within, and it's named after an Eskimo. But it's the, as it turned out, and we didn't know this at the time, but it's the highest peak in Newfoundland and Quebec. It's also the highest peak in Canada, east of the Rocky Mountains. and it's considered the most remote mountain in Canada, 300 miles away from any support. Yeah. And there are write-ups on the web. I won't go through this, but this just described the route. They finally reached the technical part of the Minaret Ridge, traversing part of the ridge, so the summit was extremely trying given the weather, and et cetera. It was, and Chris himself wrote up, it was very interesting, he wrote up an article for Appalachia, which is a magazine that's produced by the Appalachian Mountain Club in the Boston area, but he did not tell anyone where this was. He just said it was up in Labrador. And, but the secret came out, and our climb of that peak became known to the world, so to speak, because of Canadians doing it, trying to do it in 1978, 5 years later.
Did you do it in limber boots?
He did. In fact, he says it right here. It says, the limber boots that had carried me so far, they began to delaminate from the soles. Our rope was a 100-foot piece of 1/4-inch nylon. This was not heavy rope. Pitons and carabiners, we didn't have any of that. We were just climbing, and he said, as he was pointing out here, we wound around pinnacle after pinnacle, glancing past our feet down to one cirque and then another, relaying our rear ends, which were cold and wet from sitting on snow. As we did not reach the summit for another 3 hours, it was an ample opportunity to reflect on this.
Compare that to the article on page 2 of today's Daily.
Anyway, he ends it up, once we got to the summit, we were thinking about our campsite and so hoping that the bears hadn't gotten after it. And also, it offered some beautiful views. I'll show you in a second.
Wow.
So this is from the summit of Mont de Breville. And this is that west ridge that our friends nominally try to do, but it's very difficult. Ours wasn't trivial, but it was doable. Just the view looking down to the ponds and the glacier below. So this is actually me. This is a view picture of the Minaret Ridge. So this is what we were walking on very carefully because one of us gets hurt here. That's a serious problem. There's no.
Sure.
And here's our heavy mountain, our parachute cord. It's our climbing line. And if you, very interestingly, just when I started putting this talk together a year ago, I decided, I wonder what is known about this mountain now. And I hadn't looked at this until just last year. And here it is. Now it's called Mont de Cauvebec. It goes on, and it says, due to a difficult access, unpredictable weather any time of year, there's west. The final sections are technical in nature. They're low-grade technical, but technical. So we did this, American climbers, so here this was, I had no idea. Michael Adler and Krista Gerza were the first to scale the peak in 1973. The first Canadian party did it 5 years later.
I'm sure the wind wasn't blowing either, right?
It wasn't too bad, fortunately. The weather was reasonably cooperative for us. Anyway, it's listed as most isolated peaks in Canada, #1. In North America, #12. It's 5,400 feet, and the key of about 5,400 feet is you're climbing it from sea level, so it's a reasonably, and this is where it's located on the coast map. So this is another peak that we climbed that same year, and just gives you a view of this fjord, this Knockrock Fjord, which 2 years later we ended up sailing into.
Yes.
And so that's the 1973 expedition. This is the 1975 expedition, and here's pictures of Virginia and I on the Luttrell sailboat. This is the boat, taking a picture from the boat, taken from the dinghy, and another picture that we staged, obviously with the photographers, such as they were us in this boat, in our dinghy while this was sailing along. This
You
just
should
shows
mention
some.
it broke up shortly after we passed it.
Yeah, it did. That's
I
right.
was looking at the line on it. It looked like a fracture.
Yeah. It once we got away from this thing actually
rolled over?
It rolled over. It would not have been good had we been there with that sail.
Those are canvas sails.
They are. No, they were nylon.
They were
They were nylon.
It was a wood boat though.
So this just shows you some of the coastline that we did in 1975. In 1973, we came up in this stretch by kayak. We were able to, this way, we were able to just take the kayaks out of the water and put them over here. In the sailboat, we couldn't do that. And you can see the boat is actually tied to an iceberg here temporarily. Unfortunately. So we climbed a peak that's wholly within Newfoundland, Labrador, and it has now the name of Tornascope. And it's, again, an Eskimo name. And it's the highest, second highest peak in this area. And that's just a view from it looking out. So it's a little closer to the coast, so you see more of the Nakvak Fjord in the distance. What I ended up doing on some of these pictures, I went to Google Earth and I was able to figure out exactly where some of these pictures were by matching the terrain up in my picture. Because I was very poor about documenting these things back in 1973. So this is looking down from where the boat is, this little speck right here. And we had come up, and there's a picture of myself on the summit. Here's this, so Mount Kalvik was here, Mount Tornascope was here, and there's this big fjord, which we sailed. So from this time, we sailed into Nakvak Fjord. As you saw, the boat was here, and we ended up climbing this peak. This is a Google Earth version of that same spot. So this is another peak that we climbed, also a first ascent. And it's in a place called Bear's Gut. It's only 3,800 feet high, but we were the first to climb it. Now, the sad part of this story, in a sense, a real sense, is our friend Chris Gerza actually died in 1977. And so we tried to name this peak after him. And again, last year, I didn't know until last year I was successful. I was looking at maps of this part of the coast, and there it was, Mount Gerza. So we were successful in naming it.
Did he die climbing?
No, he had a brain tumor, which his wife is convinced, because he was involved in some of the earlier testing of atomic bombs that the government did, and he was an observer. He was in the Army. But this actually talks about Mount Gerza, and it mentions in here that I, Virginia, Elizabeth, and the two Luttrells climbed it. There's also a similar web page about Mount Tornascope, which also gives credit to Virginia for having been there and done this. So that's the Labrador story. And now we're going to move to the island of Newfoundland, and this is very different rock. It's not. It's underneath the rabbit ear of Newfoundland is in fact of the Canadian Shield, but all the rock on top of it is not, and it's a mix of gneiss, granite, shale, sandstone, limestone, and it changes fairly dramatically as you go east. This is the oldest rock, but this middle area here is essentially stuff that was in the ocean when the Ichthys Ocean closed, and it's a mix of volcanic and various other rocks. This very eastern area is sandstone and conglomerate. It's right in this color here. Shale, and this is the part that came all of this. And, you know, it kind of has a look of Scotland in a sense of how fragile and some narrow little bridges here, but this all came from Africa. So Newfoundland, the island of Newfoundland was very interesting because it got assembled from different pieces.
About where is St. John's?
St. John's is right here, right there. Yeah. So it's on this peninsula. So this talks to a little bit about these various regions, and the Avalon and the Gander zones, which are the easternmost sections, are from fragments of the African continents, thought to be similar to Morocco. The Dunwich area consists of smashed up and metamorphic remnants of the ocean between the continental margins. the western edge of the Lycodus Ocean was pushed over 100 kilometers over the Precambrian shield rocks, and that's this part. That's called the Humber region, which is the westernmost part. And these form the Appalachian Mountains that extend all the way south in the United States. So what we did was, this, in the year 2000, we had never been, well, let me point this out. Our sailing on our own boat was confined to this area here. We sailed 18 times along this part of the coast. We had at various times after we were done tried to get up to here into the middle part, but we never gave it enough effort, and we never got there. And so in 2015, when we were doing our anniversary, we actually went up to all the way to the very northern tip of Newfoundland, and also and down into the Grossmore National Park. Anyway, so it's very interesting, the assembly of Newfoundland. Okay, so this West Coast area, which we visited in 2015, is what I'm going to talk about for a little bit right now. The core of the region is fairly old rock, not as old as in Labrador, but fairly old. The rest of the peninsula and most of the coastline is Cambrian Ordovician sedimentary rocks. Some key exceptions occur, and we'll talk about that in the Grossmore National Park, which is located right here. In fact, one of the interesting things about that is there is some rock, there is this periodotite mantle rock that is actually on the surface. So there is actually exposed mantle visible in the park. You'll see that. So
Mike, is that the Gas Bay Peninsula?
No. This is the Gas Bay is that way.
The next one over.
Is the next one over.
Okay.
So yeah, this is all the island of Newfoundland. Yeah, and it's the Gas Bay. It's over there.
Thanks.
Yeah. So this is a view of one of the treks we did when we were there. That was the picture. The picture at the very start was on the same trek. So this is quite diverse. It's varies between sedimentary rock and then granite and gneiss as you come towards the top. It's about 2,000 feet high. I wanted to do this because this view is really spectacular, and I assumed there would be a trail that would somehow take you up here. Well, there aren't no trails, and the only way to do it, that doesn't involve probably weeks of scrambling, is to take a boat to here, and then you have a guide that takes you up through here. And it's rough. It's a 2,000-foot climb, which by itself isn't that bad, but it really isn't a trail. It's a route. And it was infested with black flies. Unbelievable. I did not have a headlamp at net. The rest did. I suffered for it. I was using lots of bug dope. So this is so talking about Grossmore. So the Western Brook Pond is. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But it's up here. Bond Bay, which is the main part. This area C here is where the exposed mantle rock is located, and it's one of the places in the world where you can actually see that rock on the surface. And it says the boundary between the sedimentary rocks on the coast and the older gneiss is a thrust fault that occurred during this 4,440 million year ago orogeny of tectonic orogeny, the analog to the Caledonian orogeny in Scotland, in Europe. They call that the Caledonian orogeny. It's the same thing. It's just. And yeah, so in addition to doing that hike, we did a lot. We climbed up Grossmore Mountain the very next day, and yeah, it was interesting getting into this Western Brook Pond. I jumped over it. So we were at the visitor center in the park, and I found out there was no trails that took you anywhere near that viewpoint. So how do we do it? Well, they gave us the name of a guide who does this, and I ended up calling him up that evening, and we arranged to do it the following morning. So it was amazing that he was available, and we put this thing together at the last bus minute. But that was the best weather day, so we wanted to do it that day. So this is again in that same area that we were just talking about in Bond Bay, obviously some serious folding and thrusting going on here during that orogeny. This is the periodotite rock. This is mantle rock, normally 20 kilometers below the surface, but here it is right on the surface. And, oh yeah, by the way, that's our son-in-law. This is, we're climbing up, doing climbing, and this is showing some of the rock here. This is serpentinite, which is metamorphosed peridotite, and it gets that way when it's exposed to heat and flowing water, and it has a very green cast to it. And so you can see the peridotite and this also, this metamorphic rock intertwined.
It's peridotite.
Peridotite, good, thank you. Yeah, and this is just a picture of climbing this mountain. Now we're back into the bond.
What color is that rock when you have a fresh face of it? Does it look the same or?
Yeah, it is definitely still has that.
It's mostly
reddish
orange,
orange.
so
Yeah,
it's
it's
dark
all-
green.
Yeah, deep sea, algae,
Okay.
very greenish looking.
Well, that's the stuff that had to
That's
metamorphose, but the peridotite itself was not that color. No, it was not that
So
color.
is that iron like oxide there that we're seeing?
I think, yeah,
Rust?
yeah. There's iron, lots of iron and manganese and feldspar. So this is overlooking Bond Bay from the headlands. Now we're going to take you on that walk that we did, and this is just a picture of. Western Brook Pond is interesting. It used to be a fjord. It is now 100 feet above sea level, and this is the glacial rebound. So it originally was at the sea level, carved by glaciers, but then when the glaciers melted, that whole area popped up, and so it is now called a pond, and there's a river that connects it to the ocean. But it looks like a fjord. One of the waterfalls, again, about 2,000 feet above us. So here we are, finally having gone through these swarms of black flies. We were able to, once we got above the timber line, there was some wind, and it wasn't quite so bad. Our guide took this picture of the four of us. That's
You should
daughter.
explain who's with us,
Yeah,
yeah, her
and he had
husband.
shorts on, did it bother his?
Well, he had it sprayed. He sprayed himself too, but yeah, he got bitten anyway. It was almost impossible to avoid getting bite. And this is just more pictures of as we went further up. You can see this up here. What you'll see shortly when I start talking about the south coast. The south coast is above timberline from sea level, but this being on the west coast is more protected, and so you do have forest. 1,000 feet of forest that you have to work your way through. And that was the roughest part of the trip because it was because of the bugs. But lots of, here we are descending waterfall. And it's, this is Lauren will appreciate this. This is 6 pictures to make one. So it's HDR left, HDR right, with 3 pictures each, and then put them together as a panorama. Stitch them together.
My camera can do that now.
It's just, yeah, now we're climbing Rosemore Peak. This is the next day. So we didn't have enough.
Which route did you take, the short one or the long one?
We took the short one, the shortest possible one.
Up that street?
Yeah.
The street's 5 feet
You've
wide?
done that.
We've done
You've
that.
done that. Yeah. It's, we took the shortest. It was interesting about the Western Brook hike we did the day before. We met up a group of people that were going to hike all the way from Western Brook Pond to Gross Morn and then down. And that's the other way you can do it, but that's a 4-day hike. But it was very interesting. As we were going up, there was a cry from someone who was to the left of us, and
Cry for help.
a cry for help. And our guide asked him where he was.
That was Nancy.
Our guide asked him where he was, and he said, you're, and then the F word. It says, go back up. You cannot get down from here. You cannot get down from here. And he went back up, so that was the last we heard of him. But then as we were coming down, we met up with him. This guy was a sorry case because he was going to do that 4-day hike. And he ran out, he got caught in bad weather, he was all by himself. He got lost up there because it fogged in, he couldn't tell where he was. He ate through all his food, and he was in tough shape. Fortunately, he ran into us, and so we were able to get him out.
You can imagine how many bug bites he had.
Yeah, he was
just
in bad,
covered.
he was in bad shape. Yeah, let's see. So yeah, you'll see from Grossmorn. That's right here. There's I think the next picture is this lake. And again, this is another 6 pictures to make one picture. HD on it.
I wondered how it got
Yeah,
this
is that
fantastic picture.
Another cutoff fjord?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
It looks like.
yeah.
Is this something?
Quartzite cap on 500 million year old shale and limestone.
And it's very fashionable to have your trousers tucked into your socks.
Yeah, just to
Keeps
keep
the bugs
Keep the
out.
bugs out.
What was really amazing about the following the rest of the trip after that first day, we thought we were really in for it with the it looked like all of the the vast majority of the black flies congregated in that fjord, Western Brook Pond, because we didn't have much bugs up here, even on the way up. We didn't have a bug problem.
Is that a marker? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's a trail marker.
Oh.
We're on a trail.
Actually.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the national park. There's no trails that get you into. The interesting thing about that Western Brook Pond view is that is the iconic view from the park. If you go onto the park brochures, you'll see that. But there's no easy way to get there. This is actually a peak that has trails on it. And they're very good
I
trails.
said you can't get there from here.
Yeah, yeah. And the guy, Clem was his name. He has a postcard, not a postcard, but a business card with this view. It says, "Picture yourself here."
I tell you, as a geologist, with that old quartzite like that, when you hit it with a rock hammer, the rock hammer just literally comes flying back on it. And it's just a bing on it, and you don't break it real easy.
This is another feature in that park. It's called Baker's Brook Falls. This is basalt at another location in the park. Pillow lava, a place called Green Gardens.
Does everybody know what pillow lava is? That's basically where the lava is coming out under the ocean, so it immediately kind of freezes the outer edge and it forms in these little pillows.
These pillows, that's what they. See them up there as a coin, give you a scale. Yeah, and then there's some quartz intrusion into Gabbro.
Gold somewhere.
All this. You see a coin here. Yeah. So okay. So this is the next aspect of this talk. Now this is the beginning of the 18 trips that we took by our sailboat. So we did not actually sail. I was still working big time for GE, and I couldn't afford 6 weeks off. So I managed to get 3 and 4 weeks off by taking time away from it. Back then, in the 70s, the only thing we got was 2 weeks. So I ended up taking time off. But we were leaving from upstate New York, our home there, with our sailboat, hauling it. So we hauled the boat up into Cape Breton and then sailed from there. And
Suburban there.
yeah, it's a F had the 354
8 miles to the gallon.
huge. Yeah, we got about 8 miles per gallon. This boat is a 10,000 pound boat on a trailer. The load is huge. It's a very heavy boat, and it's on a 1,500 pound trailer.
Father had one of those, my mother wouldn't let him park it in front of the house.
So we went up here by sailboat 18 times in 28 years.
You can tell it's the Virgin trip because there's no name on the trip.
The boat is, yeah, and you'll see later on the name, it does appear, but it's 1,100 miles to Cape Breton. This is getting ready to go across Cabot Strait, which is the crux of the sailing adventure, because it's a wide open strait of water with shipping and storms that go ripping through there. It was never my most favorite part of the trip, but it was the only way to get there. So we left from Sydney Harbor, which is near the tip of Cape Breton. There's a little town here called Ingonish, if you've been up here. And what we did was we sailed up to Ingonish and then did an overnight trip across Cabot Strait to
You
do
found
there. Our daughter was less than 1 year old on that trip, so she was oblivious to the whole thing. And,
Boy, it's nice smooth water.
nice smooth water.
Yeah.
We ended up
That
having,
white, and that white is all fog. I'll
Light,
say
light
that.
winds.
and we ended up with diapers, you know, so various people were changing her diapers, and someone else was sailing at the time, this is at night, and diapers would go flying over.
Ooh, we're gonna report you.
But on the south coast, we ended up, we sailed all the way up here, and then 1 year, or actually twice, we went to Saint-Pierre. So these are the consolation prize to France for having, for losing North America. But they still own these, unlike Great Britain, which is, doesn't. You'll see some pictures of that. This shows a little more detail, and we're going to go into these areas. The geology here is different. This is pretty much sedimentary rock, but all this pink is intrusive granite, and it's about 400 million years old from the tectonic orogeny. Similar age to the rock on the west, on the top part of what where we just were. And pockets of sediments and pockets.
You better speed it up a little bit.
Yeah, okay, now we'll go through this quickly. This is the first trip that we were there in 1977. So after having put all of this stuff together, figuring out how to do this, getting the boat, et cetera, I was just in euphoria when I got here. There's our less than 1 year old daughter. This just gives you a feel. The terrain here, there is some growth, but most of it is above timberline, right at sea level. There's a picture of us in 1970, after this, in 88, after the next addition to the family. This is what the towns look like. This is a small town. You can see our boat on the dock to the left. And these are my old charts, Canadian charts. These things were as much, the charts go back to the 1870s. There are huge errors in longitude, over a mile. And I ended up using Loran and then eventually GPS. And these are my scribbles of waypoints. Yeah. This is one of the villages which we returned to many times. This is our second visit here. And these are little kids that we, essentially by coming for the next 20 years, they all grew up. So did our kids. This is the name of this town. This town is now abandoned. It's just last two or three years ago, they took a poll. The Canadian government said, if every one of you agrees to it, we will pay to relocate you. But everyone has to agree. And they ended up with a little arm twisting in a couple of cases. But it's a shame. It's anyway, the rock, the peaks in that area, we climbed that peak. We had friends in the area, which we visited as our kids were growing older. And that's the last time we were there in 2005, looking down. There's our friend, that is Chris Gertza. In the year, I said he actually died the same year. It's his wife and one daughter, and there's Emily. This is one of our favorite places. It's called the Croulat, and it's just lots of beautiful places to wash, hike, and start boat. You can see that we're there alone, and particularly in this era, we never saw another sailboat. The one time we saw another sailboat is when we arranged to meet with our friends. It's a picture of the two of us on our boat. There's Virginia and Emily taking laundry, also washing their hair, and but with bug nets on. You'll see. Yeah. There's the latest addition to the family in that Croulat. Jerry, a little older, and catching cod. It became illegal to do this, and with very serious consequences. Your boat would be confiscated. But not in this year.
Subsistence fishing?
It was, believe it or not, they were even restricted from doing that except for a couple of times in the year. And so because of that, there were severe penalties. We're in the middle part of this coast. This is called Burjo, and there actually is a road. When we first started coming here, it was a 100-mile unpaved road. it gradually became paved. And during the 90s, we started actually having the boat launch here because it was a launching facility, and we ended up driving at 100 Mile Road. There's some interesting stories there, but I don't have the time to tell you. But this is Burjo, the village, and this is Sandbanks area, beautiful sand.
That's a provincial park.
That's a provincial park, yeah.
What is it?
Back up one.
Yeah, back up. Is that just?
This is just sand. This is a stream.
Yeah, going down to the.
Oh, okay.
Comes
Okay.
going down through the,
Yeah.
and yeah, the tide, this is, at certain parts of the day is flooded, and then as the tide goes out,
The outflow.
the outflow creates this little channel.
I thought you mentioned it.
That was in Waituka.
Pretty good tidal break.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Believe it or not, and, you know, you get used to the idea of these horrendous tides in Maine and Nova Scotia,
Yeah.
Bay of Fundy. But up here, it's about 3 or 4 feet. As soon as you get around Cape, yeah, as soon as you get around Nova Scotia, the peninsula, get onto the Atlantic side of Nova Scotia, the tides drop way down. And they're pretty much the same all the way up. This looks like a little lake, and it isn't. It's actually connected. There's a little passage that you get here at high water. This is another village in the distance on an island called Ramya. And so where we just were, that's the Burjo Islands. This is Ramya Islands. And then we're going to get into this area here, which is these very high bays. The coast changes its character big time as you get into this area here. Some of these bays are over 10 miles long, and they have 1,000 to 1,500 foot cliffs and waterfalls. It's really amazing country. There's some of the pictures of the waterfalls. Here's a picture of our boat sailing wing and wing down east. This makes it clear what the word is down east means, because you have westerly winds, and so going east is easy. It's coming back that's the problem. And particularly in a small boat like this, we would often wake up before dawn, and because the winds usually were lighter or very early, and then make our way and then tuck in for the rest of the day, and go out and maybe in the evening a little bit, and so these little tricks of getting up and down the coast. This is one of our favorite places. This is called Dead Man's Cove. Nice, beautiful waterfall, and there we are in 1970. And it's on here, so 79. So
You're
this,
brave.
I feel myself sweating. See, Virginia and Emily have had that side and Braden. So our friends, our friends came in 1978, so we met them there.
These are the same friends that we went to last.
Oh yeah, to Labrador, the Luttrells. That's our boat, looking from the top. It's our boat.
How was the boating ground?
It's pretty good. It was as you got into these little bays, it was mudded out, so the anchors held. We also had some we've also had some incredible blows in these bays. But there's Virginia. We're doing a hike up to the highlands there at the end of the day. Laundry being done up in the stream where it's fresh water, and blueberries and pitcher plants. So we're blueberries, and if you were there in August, you could actually get some. This is on the other side of that bay. There was a town here. It's called there was a village here in Lagoon. That's what the village looked like in about 1950. That's not my picture. This is my picture in 2005. You see, all these buildings are gone. All that's left are
Is the building there?
there's couple of little buildings right there. And that's the color. I just took the color out of this picture to make it that. And there, the waterfall in Dead Man's Cove is right there. Yeah. Looking towards the Dead Man's Cove. Sunset. This is the last time we left the Lagoon. We've been there probably close to 18 times, and it was a sad thing. And this is another one of the bays just right next door, beautiful, called Aberon Bay. This is a bay where we had 75-mile-an-hour Willy Waugh blasts one year, and it just was incredibly
You have an auxiliary on the boat?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It has a decent motor. It had, at this time, it had a Atomic 4 inboard, and it eventually became a diesel. But this waterfall is part of the scenery. This is what it looks like when you get up on these flatlands. A lot of glacial fragments, these little ponds which are all carved out by the glacier. This is one of the towns further east called Francois. So this is the entrance light, and this is the very first time you were in Francois. This is one of the other villages we came back to time and again. We got to know the people. This was 1978, our first trip there, and there's our friends who were with us, and Emily. That's a picture of. You see how this bay is nestled in is quite a high cliff beyond. And you see it there.
It's some gorgeous pictures.
Yeah. This was 2001. This is the church that's there, and I photographed this little record, but it basically says the church was erected in 1920, and then in 1921 time, it says here, then came a heavy storm of wind, and it blew down. So they ended up reconstructing it in 1922, and it's still standing. That's the inside of it. And a view of the town from a different aspect. This is actually a freshwater pond, and that's the ocean.
People there live off fishing? Is that it?
Yeah, well, not so much anymore. So what's happened on the South Coast since the cod fishing has been basically disappeared. It's been overfished, and so there's very little cod fishing, if any. If there is some, it's very rare. So all the young people that used to live here are gone. And so in Burjo, one of the friends that this is becoming a retirement community because there's no way to, there's no work here. Miss Virginia and her brother Bob hiking up to the point. The last spot we're going to, well, this is another fjord further down with a still standing church. This was abandoned in early, I think before, in the 70s, 60s. Emily with Irises in the church. This is the ocean side of this town, and it's just a view. These are all huge, 1,000 feet plus granite cliffs, and they go right down into the water. There's the you see the church from above. This is one of the things we did there. This is 1985. Emily and Virginia muscling, and here in essentially Jerry at that point was about the same age as Emily was in that picture, and again collecting mussels. So that rock face is incredible place. So this is up above, and another view of my boat. This is called Iron Skull. And the last thing in the talk is getting to just a few pictures from Saint-Pierre. Here, I mentioned, to go back to the geology of the, so here we are, and Saint-Pierre is where we just were, we're here, but then as you get off here, you get into a different type of rock. It was the same rock, the Saint-Pierre was the same rock as the easternmost part of Newfoundland. So we visited there in 82 and 94. In 82, this was an amazing place. It was a going concern. When you were in Newfoundland, just 20 miles away, you had really small little stores, no fresh food, canned whatever. You could get beer though. But here in Saint-Pierre in 1982, there were French restaurants, and you could get fresh croissants in the morning. I mean, it was just a total different world, and it was economy was tourism. Lots of French Canadians and fishing. Yeah, the geology here is similar to the eastern, and it's 800 million year old ash and lava. Flat, very flat. And these are. This is an old picture of Saint-Pierre in the sailing days, and here's a Saint-Pierre for the luckier. You'll see her bottles. This is Saint-Pierre during Prohibition. A lot of booze got entered the United States via Saint-Pierre. Lots and lots of stories about the Coast Guard, the Canadian Coast Guard, the American Coast Guard. So this, what's interesting is look at the building in the background there carefully. You'll see the big windows. And the next picture that same building is there. The windows, doesn't look nearly as interesting, but it's the same building. And then this is it. This is 1977 when we're going to Newfoundland, and this is 2005 when we're coming back. That's it. It's the same boat.
Oh, this one you have an outboard as the.
Oh, it's only I'm only carrying it.
Okay.
And
For
the
the
outboard's for the dinghy.
Ah, okay.
The outboard is for my dinghy. And
Do you tow the dinghy or is it?
we generally deflated it because of the weather. We could get big storms. The one year, remember I was telling you in one fjord, there were some horrendous winds in there. That 75, we were ending up going, we were trying to find a better anchorage, which was a mistake, but we ended up going out and the wind was behind us. It picked the dinghy up and threw it at the boat, and it punctured it on the propeller from the outboard. So we lost our dinghy temporarily. I had enough spare rubber pieces and all. I managed to patch it up. It wasn't as good as new again, but at least it was usable. The dinghy was important to us. That's how we got ashore. Except when we did stay in some of these towns overnight, like Francois, Bourgeot. We would stay overnight sometimes, and other nights we would anchor. Most of the time we're anchoring, and we're almost always by ourselves. And I think, yeah, that's it.
Did you ever encounter any large commercial?
Yeah,
vessels?
no, we never did. But I'm told in the fall season, and this is later on in the history of all of this. Francois, there was Russian tour boats would come into Francois and let people go ashore. When we were first doing this, there were actually boats that would run along the shore. They were called the runner and the other one, sprinter, and they would leave from like the western part, go into the middle, and then there was another one from the other side who would come and they would meet. And so people could almost on a daily basis move along the coast by these boats. And that's where all the food, except for Bourgeot, there were no roads on that coast at all. So that's how food got in there. But as time went on and more people were leaving, they spaced these boats times up more and more. And at this point, I don't even know if they're running. Because the only town that's still actually active on that coast is probably, it might be Francois. And they're not that far away from the big peninsula to the east. And there are roads. The roads begin just to the east of where we were. And they come down the big peninsula, and you can actually, so one year we actually left from that peninsula. We had someone trail a boat over there. We unlaunched there and came back.
Here's a next I see you get your radar reflected rig down there, so.
Yeah.
I never encountered anybody.
Yeah, you
That
have to
was
see.
for the crossings of Cabot Street.
Yeah, it was mainly because of there was large shipping in
Some of
Cabot
it's
Street.
large shipping, so
Yeah.
they
Now,
can see you.
but I didn't go into this, but I ended up eventually with some fairly nice navigation on this boat. I had sometime in the 90s, I had a radar, and then I also had a handheld radar before that, where it was called a Whistler, and you would use it, you would point it, and you had earphones, and you could, you would listen, the distance to the object was proportional to the frequency, the dead sheet.
How many feet was the sail?
27.
We were the unusual people that went from a larger sailboat to a smaller sailboat, because this one has part of it's a keel with a centerboard,
Yeah.
so you can retract the centerboard, and then you could trailer this boat.
Yep.
Whereas the former boat we had was also a tartan. We loved tartans, but you couldn't trailer it.
So this had a
Without the wide,
centerboard, retractable centerboard and an inboard diesel.
Now it does.
So
Yeah.
the centerboard was ahead of the keel.
The centerboard folded into the keel. It folded into the keel. There's a lead keel, fully encased. It's not. There's no keel bolts. This boat was built by Tartan Marine I think in the 60s. It was the first boat of that company made that was fiberglass. It was designed by Sparkman and Stevens, which is very well prominent designers. And Tartan Marine still exists. And you
We
know.
should mention, we still have the boat too.
And we still have the boat. It's in Maine, and we're gonna use it every year.
When you're navigating up there, can you navigate by the lighthouses?
No, there's so few navigators, and they had, that I don't think has changed. There was, when you got near Burjo, and you would find a buoy. There were some buoys in the Burjo area, but in the bulk of that coast, and so the way you navigated, and we did this in Pea Soup Fog, the way you navigated was you try to go from island to island. You stayed on the outer edge of the islands, and you tried to pick up the next island, and then you hopped down, and then gradually as well, GPS came on, and that took all the fun out of it. And then the radar took a certain amount of the fun out of it too, because you could actually see it. You could see the islands before you got to them.
Have you ever gone up the Norwegian coast in the
No.
fjords or stuff?
Yeah, it's on my list, not probably to sail it, but to at least get over there. Yeah. These cliffs are not as high as Norway, and you can see that they're very bold and they're very rugged, lack of vegetation. But the Norway are 3,000 feet.
Yeah, 3,000 to 4,000
Yeah,
feet.
high.
Just-
These are 1,500 feet.
And in Norway, they have one of the most clever navigation systems. They have all these lighthouses. And in the lighthouses, they have colored filters, very carefully positioned. And so literally when you're out in the water, you can go until you see it go from red to blue, and you know exactly where you are on the
bearing you're on.
What bearing it is. No, there's nothing like that.
Pretty clever.
These bays, back in the days when I had, well, I did this before I had any form of radar, but the handheld radar was interesting because you could, these bays were so narrow entrances, and the cliffs were so high that you could find it by panning, because you hear the thing, and then it would go way high, and then I could navigate to the inside these bays.
Even in Pea Soup Farm.
Even in Pea Soup Fog, which got a lot of, this is a lee shore, this is southwesterly winds, and brings the fog in big time. Sometimes, though, if you're in one of these deep bays on the east, you can get in far enough. You can actually keep the fog out. The fog doesn't penetrate maybe a couple of miles, and then it's...
Yeah. He said it took the fun out of it when he got GPS, but I'm sure
Yeah.
Virginia would say the fear out of it.
Well, believe it or not, I'm kidding too, because I like to have the GPS. So I was, we did this, and I have memories of not so much. The very first trip we took was to Nova Scotia from Maine, and we ran into fog at midnight, and I didn't have GPS. I didn't have Moran. I didn't have radar. All I had was a radio direction finder, and we were crossing the Gulf of Maine with all. Now you have serious tides or currents, and getting out to the I can't really remember the name of the point, but anyway, getting to that point. Well, we ran into fog, and I had made some errors, and I was just totally lost. And we just sailed and sailed all through the night. The following day, eventually, we saw a shoreline, and I figured out what angle it was, and I figured out roughly where we were, and eventually I heard a buoy. And on the Nova Scotia coast, there are buoys, not on the left, not on the Newfoundland coast. So we finally found, but for years and years after that trip and other ones, I would wake up in the middle of the night at home, get up and start sleepwalking around the house thinking I was lost in the fog. So tell me that didn't have it.
It made an impression.
That made an impression. I don't have those dreams anymore.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you very much.